Hi, I'm Kafayat Okanlawon, and I'm a VAWG practitioner. I've worked in the sector for over 15 years supporting women and girls from men's violence. Today, I'm hosting a roundtable talking about VAWG, the effects of VAWG, healing, moving forward, and the current political climate. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Stay tuned.
We need men to be able to talk to their men folk.
We're seeing how Black women, specifically in the UK, are dying in bodies of water. It's not mysterious, it is a pattern.
It's within society, it's within institutions, it's within policy.
And I'm so in awe, not of what they've been through, but how they've overcome.
Where's the conversation about thriving and not just surviving? Before we start the conversation, I'd like to give a trigger warning. We are going to be speaking about violence. If you feel like you need to pause or stop this video at any time, please do so. And if you choose to watch the conversation, please look after yourself. I'm going to hand over to my panelists. Joining us today, we have...
My name is Sandhya. I'm an art psychotherapist and I work predominantly with women and girls who have gone through domestic violence and rape.
My name is Megan. For the last 6 years, I've been working with young women and girls predominantly in the education sector. I was a teacher for 5 years and now I work for a charity that I support young women and girls.
My name's Jade. I'm a learning developer in higher education, and I'm also an author. I wrote Keisha the Skit at 13, which was published by Murky Books in 2021, and looks at the multiplicity of violence against girls.
Hi, my name is Vivienne Isebor. I am a community organizer and creative social entrepreneur. I specifically support Black women and non-binary people with ADHD, as well as raising awareness about period poverty and bringing psychology and creativity in a way to support the Black community.
Hi, I'm Niamh Molloy. I'm an early careers researcher focusing in the impact of austerity on victim survivors of gender-based violence. I've also done a bit of work on period poverty and kind of the importance of intersectionality in this work.
Hi, I'm Saba. I am an activist, public speaker and consultant. I mainly work with the LGBT plus community and Black and brown women when it comes to violence against women and girls.
My name is Bushra Khurdhid. I'm an occupational psychologist and I have been one for the last 20 years. I got interested in VAWG from certain things from my own life, from experiences, lived experiences from women within my culture and my religion.
Hi, my name is Antonia Amja Lee. I'm an artist strategist and what I would call a narrative alignment architect, helping people have the conversations they need to have, their organizations and their people, but conversations they often avoid. I'm coming from a lived experience background and also have been using artistry and the creative expression as a way to have conversations around violence against women and girls.
I'm Natalie Johnson. I'm an independent domestic violence advocate and a PhD researcher.
I'm Debra Knight. I'm a founder of a support service for victims of sexual and domestic violence.
When we talk about VAWG, violence against women and girls, the sector that we work in, what is it that we're actually speaking about?
I think for me, because of the demographic of women that I work with, for me, the subject is quite broad because I think when you're talking about violence, it can stem anything from rape to sexual assault to even verbal. So I think that in itself is kind of like a broad question.
Yeah, I agree because it's a broad, as you said, it's a broad topic.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Megan?
I agree. I was going to say it's, by definition, political, physical, emotional, economical. It can happen online. It can happen verbally. So, it's like a plethora of things. It's not just physical violence against women and girls. And I think maybe sometimes that's what people don't understand is that it can be emotional manipulation. It can be anything.
I think my experience working in VAWG was just after Rotherham. And so the focus at that time was specifically on keeping girls safe.
Yeah.
And that was specifically physical safety. So, and I've had a lot of questions since then about that and if it really does capture the multiplicity of violence that girls face. But that was my experience and that was 10 years ago now. So quite a long time. And yeah, I guess the sector has come a long way and we understand a lot more about what VAWG is.
Yeah.
But again, I think that this is an important conversation to really unpack how far it's actually come and how much further it has to go.
Yeah. And I agree with you on your point in terms of how far we've come, because it was only in 1991 that I believe the law acknowledged rape within marriage, right?
Yeah.
And so that's only 35 years ago. So there's still a long way to come. We're seeing the rise of the internet and how women and girls are experiencing violence online. And so I think as the world grows and develops, so also, unfortunately, so will violence.
For me, I think it's looking at how we exist as women across sectors. So right from childbirth, the fact that maternity leave is not equal depending on whether people are employed or self-employed. The fact that things like was it Sure First or First Sure?
Sure Start?
Sure Start, that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, things like Sure Start have been defunded. The kind of support for mothers and babies has been drastically reduced. Right up to once girls start getting into school and they start experiencing things like catcalling or gender differences in terms of access to assessments for ADHD, autism, that kind of lack of support around how neurodivergence and disability is seen within education, and then right into the workplace where women are again being catcalled, being over sexualized, the risk of assault, the gender pay gap. It's kind of like each stage of the world as a woman, there's violence against us in different ways, and then depending on culture, where you're born, how much you earn, all of those things kind of vary. So I think for me, yeah, the violence it's not just physical violence.
And as we all know, violence isn't just physical violence.
Mm.
I think, generally, I'm not going to speak from a brand perspective or a culture perspective, but I think generally violence to people means physical. But, the scars that physical violence leaves is probably less than what mental abuse sometimes can leave. Them scars are with you forever and ever. A bruise, on my face might go after a week. But the mental scar that went with that is going to last me a lifetime.
I would echo what Bushra is saying. I think there's structurally something needs to happen because more people think about violence against women and girls as just a physical form of violence. They're not thinking about coercive control, which is massively, some of the things around coercive control leads up to the violence. And if people were aware about the psychological and emotional stuff in the beginning, they probably, whatever exit strategy they needed, maybe would have come about a lot sooner before the physical starts to happen. And there are people who are, as you said, for years on, are still being impacted by the psychological and the emotional and the economic. I think that's something that people don't talk about enough, the economic impact of violence against women and girls and what that can do.
Yeah.
They don't talk about just the economic abuse from the perpetrator, but also economically when you've had some form of violence and you can't go to work because you're so impacted, and how that impacts you as well. So when we're talking about it in the VAWG sector, back to your point, I think it's important that more campaigns go beyond just the physical side of what violence against women and girls can look like, because I think that's where some cultures think culturally, I'm not saying any culture in specific, but they don't think it's bad until it becomes physical. But that one physical thing could mean that the person leaves no longer here.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so broad, and I think we don't give, there's not a hierarchy, but we kind of give space to certain types of abuse, and it's not always other. I think for a lot of the survivors like I work with, they think, oh, that's not a big deal, oh, this harassment or this sexual assault or this domestic abuse, especially like we were having a conversation earlier and I was saying a social worker said, oh, she's not black and blue, so I can't refer her to Marat. And that's another service, kind of had that conversation with
So
me.
alarming. So
yeah,
harmful.
and I was just like, there's still this kind of domestic violence versus domestic abuse, and if it's not violent, is it abuse? And how do we kind of name it and give it space?
But for me also, when looking at violence against women and girls, it is focusing on not looking at it as a monolith. It's not always just a man against a woman. And there's a lot of rooms that I've been in where that's all they've wanted to focus on. And obviously coming, representing the LGBT plus community, for me, it's really important that opens up to same-sex abuse, transphobic abuse, which, is completely ignored, the highest number of abuse takes place in that community, but also, you know, disability, the amount of violence and domestic abuse that takes place against disabled people is shocking. That's never spoken about. You never hear about sexual abuse in the less able-bodied community. So I think for me, those things are really important. So it's breaking it down, you know, by that race, gender, class, migration status, and looking at the different groups of people and how it affects all those different communities as well.
When I read about what these young women have horrifically gone through, it's like we've got to really understand that vicarious trauma is a real thing. So with me, I think the bigger question that I'm asking myself is that when I do come into like a room or into the therapy setting with a survivor, they're my actual heroes. And I'm so in awe, not of what they've been through, but how they've overcome. And to me, that's a big thing. So when I break it down just a little bit more, I'm seeing the end result, but the healing, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. So that healing can be displayed in a various array of emotions. So it could be anger. I mean, I've had clients, young women, come into my room where they're physically angry and they cannot talk and their body is shaking. So it's like me as a therapist working within that remit is like, how do I navigate that? So I think a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, but I think with what you guys were saying, I think there needs to be more educational, like in schools and in colleges, and like, you know, particularly within like the diaspora of like the Black and the brown community, as well as like our other counterparts. But I think that needs to be explored in a wider sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. When I think about what you've just said, I think, and tying it with what Jay said about generations and about some of the older generations and them having to learn, unlearn, you having to learn, unlearn. I agree with that. There's something about not knowing what you don't know and going into consciousness, and I really having to sit with yourself and say, how have I even maybe perpetrated some type of violence? And what does that look like? And how do I heal from that?
So when I founded Nine Red, that's 23 years ago, and it was founded literally because of women. I was one of these women that were falling through all the gaps in service provision. And yes, I'm going to say, yes, I was physically and sexually abused. So yes, that is definitely. But and we're professional women, so it's lots of different professional women, and it's talking about the different ways they were abused. So the woman that was abused financially, you know, is like not seen the same as the woman, like thinking she's the same as me then. Whereas I can see that's what we call now coercive control. There wasn't a name for it back then, but I could see you are being abused even though it is financial. You are being abused even though it's psychological. And I'm going to be completely honest with myself. What I found at the time when I founded this service, that the damage was more the psychological impact of like how I was being spoken to, how I was being made to feel about myself, more than the domestic or the sexual violence that was visible then, if you say. So for me, it's violence against women and girls is everything and anything that makes you feel less than who you are.
I completely agree with everything you said. I think for me, I also look at it from sort of like where patriarchy comes in and like how we're constantly fighting that sort of hierarchy of, you know, men are at the top, they make all the decisions, then women come in. But then I look at it from an intersectional lens where white men are at the top, then white women, then black men, and then black women. And, you know, we're like right at the bottom. So it's that power game and that power struggle.
Women and girls are just taught as an accepted kind of unfortunate existence, and it's just this everyday fear, like you mentioned, about just simple things like walking home and choosing what route to take. It's things like picking where you sit on a tube, you know, it's just this everyday thing, and it's this fear that we live with. It wears away and it knocks you down, and it kind of does restrict what you're doing, you know, in your everyday kind of life. And I think totally what we kind of talked about with the intersectionality of it. I think there's kind of an idea of like a typical or accepted victim of kind of gender-based violence or violence against women and girls. But I actually think there's a continued violence in the idea of trying to seek support and support that's not able, or conversations that are just focused on kind of white women in these heterosexual kind of relationships where it's like you mentioned, disabled people have much higher instances of kind of sexual violence. We see it's in the institution, it's not just these individual events, but it's within society, it's within institutions, it's within policy. And I think that's the thing. Violence against women and girls is not an individual thing. It's a structural problem, and there's structural violence. And I think that violence is sometimes harder to fight against because the institutions that are there to protect you are actually often the ones kind of fighting against you. And so I think, speaking about violence against women and girls as a real iceberg of violence, and of it being more than just kind of one-off instances of abuse, but it's this everyday structural kind of violence.
Can I very quickly just add on that? Sorry, because like what you said just reminded me that I think also it's a governmental issue.
Yes.
Massively, because although Labour has said they're going to halve it in 10 years, that's just nonsense. It's never going to happen. The facts say that's not going to happen. Statistically, it won't happen. If they keep cutting funding, and the charities aren't there to deal with it, that's not going to happen. And policing, it's not going to happen. So when you look at the government and the institutions, like you mentioned, that's what reminded me. We don't care about women in this country. They're seen as second rate. I'll pause there because
I think it's important. I think for me, when I talk about this work, I think we have to talk about the governmental, like how government perpetrate what is happening on the ground, right? And like what governmental violence basically. It's an institutional violence. The government have a part to play in the way in which we experience violence, right? And I think we would be remiss if we didn't call that out and be honest about how they continue to perpetrate it, whether it be through funding, who they choose to fund and why. As we said, specialized services are closing in and around the country. And so I think when we speak about what is VAWG, we have to talk about government. I think we have to talk about safety work, as you mentioned, the ways in which every day we have to continuously think about how we navigate the world. And a good friend of mine, Vivienne Isebor, she has a book called The Right Amount of Panic. And in terms of that title, I remember there was a time she was speaking to as women, we don't know what the right amount of panic to have. Someone might say, oh, you should have just walked through the park. That's light work. But it's actually like, when does it become dangerous? Exactly. How far do we have to go, almost flirt with danger to be like, oh my gosh, this is it. If we think about like Sarah Everard, at what moment was it like, oh my gosh, I'm not safe? And I think there's something about women continuously like thinking about what is the right amount of panic can I have? Yes, we don't want to assume all men are going to attack us in the park, but we can't afford to not think that. We can't. We can't afford to not think that somebody will attack us if we walk through the park.
But sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of abuse comes from familiar people, our familiars.
Of course.
So it's not even strangers.
Yeah. And we don't want to buy into the stranger danger, the person hanging around the corner. But then we have to buy into all the things. We have to think about home. We have to think about outside of the home, work, everywhere we go. And I like the point. It's never ending. And I like the point that you mentioned, which that Liz Kelly coined, the continuum of violence around essentially from birth, as you spoke about, from maternal health until death, into whether it's older woman abuse.
It's like the tip of the iceberg. Like that we're experiencing, someone doing like catcalling someone, or like being out in a club and then someone thinking they can grope you. Those are like tips of the icebergs of the bottom line thing, which is women are not treated the same as men, or women are seen as lesser than men, or there's like an entitlement around women's bodies, or there's a lack of care around women's bodies. And the attitude and the belief and philosophy of that then builds the customs, the lack of care in government, the treatment within day-to-day life, the treatment by strangers, even like victim blaming within assault culture. Like all of that is like, it's all rooted in the base of it, which expands and cascades into so many different parts of life, which is why, like you said, it's not small, because it's linked to something. If it was just that one-off thing, of course it would be small, but it's not just the one-off thing. So I always think that that's like a lack of understanding of the wider picture. Like I remember arguing with somebody where I was saying that attitudes towards women has a positive correlation with assault, and they were like, no, it doesn't. I was just like, why do you think people do? Like,
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think these things are just happening in silos? Like all of these things are connected. How we think and how we make sense of the world then influences our behavior. So if a bunch of men, like this whole red pill movement, think that women are less than them and should do what they say and they have a right to their body, that thought is of course going to then turn into action. So this idea that anything is siloed is just it's a dismissal of reality.
Yeah. Because if you don't think somebody is worthy of being a human, why would you not harm them? Because you think you can harm them and get away with it.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the way, especially our trans brothers and sisters are being killed, especially over in the States. We're seeing how they're being killed and it's not being reported. We're seeing how Black women, specifically in the UK, are dying in bodies of water. People are going to say this mysterious. It's not mysterious. It is a pattern and something we have to highlight. And I guess, Saba, what you highlighted, I guess, essentially of the system of it all, the isms and schisms of it all. Do you know what I mean? Like, because the thing is, we can't speak about violence against women and girls and not speak about racism. We can speak about homophobia, transphobias, all the obias, all of
They
them,
all go together.
all the isms, the
They all
obias.
go hand in hand. I've talked about this so many times, that racism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, ableism, they all go hand in hand. If you're a racist, the chances are you're a sexist, you're an Islamophobe, you're a transphobe, you're a homophobe, and they're all the same thing. And these people that mouth off on social media, you go and look at their these people, I can't even give them a name, they're nameless to me, they're not worthy of a name, but they embody all of this hatred, and I don't know where it's come from, but it's come from somewhere. And you know, and with the rise of the far right, with the rise of reform, it's scary times, but we have to speak out.
Well, actually, the intersectionality of violence against women and girls and misogyny, rather than it have to be called misogynoir, it should have been the base point. And so therefore, what we're working with is structurally the fact that at the base level, all women should be included. Intersection should not be an add-on. And that's where the issue is because you may have your lived experience from what you know, and because you're within your community, the numbers that you're probably referencing are going to be higher than what I would see, because we're from different communities, but fundamentally we are all women. And so the scope of that needs to be at the base level. Structurally, every woman at the base level should be treated equally, and then equitably, depending on what is needed for those particular women that go into that space.
Where's the conversation about like joy? Where's the conversation about thriving and not just surviving this thing or things that have happened?
I think for me, I can see it from 2 points of generation, like from the younger set, and plus being a mother and having a daughter who's actually a creative and is in industry and stuff like that. But I think yes, it does stem from the home. And I think if we're talking, I mean, we're not specifically talking about Black and brown diaspora, but I think that if we're talking about certain communities, like sometimes we don't express sometimes how we feel. And I think, and I know even from my generation, we didn't really talk about how we're feeling, or, you know, we didn't talk about violence, or we didn't talk about, you know, how a man is supposed to treat women. But I think now with the younger generation that I kind of like work with now, there's more of an open discussion. But I think it really does stem from like home life, and then like the people who you come into contact with. But I think it's generally like you have to have that ongoing discussion. It can't just stop at like, oh, I'm 30 or I'm like 25 or I'm 15. It has to be an ongoing discussion for me, I feel.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right, because I think there's also something for me about, even with the conversation we're having specifically about young women taking on caring responsibilities, whilst in one breath, even for me, I'm saying it allowed me to be resilient, independent. I got a close relationship with my sisters. If you take the context out even wider, where was my brother at? What was my brother doing? No offense to my brother, I love ya, but the expectation, who did the expectation fall on? It's usually the girl child. Do you know what I mean? And so I think there's a lot of nuances, and I guess it isn't all bad and it isn't all good.
I think it's funny because you're talking about coining terms, and I was reading about adultification, writing about adultification, and actually I saw something the other day, and it was saying, and it was specifically looking at Caribbean households, and it was saying about how we parentify our children from a young age. And it was saying, like, in social services and systems in the Western world, that's quite seen as negative. And they were saying, actually, we're teaching independence, we're teaching resilience, we're teaching responsibility, and the kind of loss of that. And I was kind of thinking like, oh, you know, in therapy, I've always kind of heard, oh, you know, you took on quite a lot of responsibility at a young age. Actually, I learned independence at a young age, but it's how it's framed. So things are kind of said in one way. So adultification, we look at it in a negative lens, but actually there's positives to that as well. And I think those conversations can be missing. And even in my research now, I had a young person and she was talking about looking after her siblings because her mum, you know, was on substances and her dad was in prison. And then she was placed into care but separated from her siblings. And she lost that role of caring for her siblings. And like for her identity, the impact of that. And social services did that. And she was like, you know, they tore my family apart, but they don't see the harm they caused just by separating us.
Yeah.
And that was done as a safety measure, right?
Yeah.
But actually it took away a big part of who she was and how she showed up in the world.
Yeah.
And I think what you were saying before as well, it's the institutions that cause harm as well. It's the violence. It's not just, you know, this relationship or this person. It's really looking at like the whole system.
Yeah. I want to stay there for a minute with what you said. And so you're saying that when we're looking at one particular thing, I guess there's something about looking at it from different lenses and different contexts.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, because I was one of those young people who took their sisters to school and dropped them off. And for me, in one breath, I look at my mum, I'm like, right, you had me out here doing a lot of stuff. But then I take pride in that. I take pride in being a big sister. I take pride in saying that, like, I took my sisters to school every day. And to be fair, our relationship, we have a particular type of relationship because of that. But then also I have to look at the bigger picture of why my parents weren't able to drop my sisters to school every day, because of the fact that they needed to go to work and make money. And so we can't talk about one thing without
in
the other.
isolation, right? Yeah.
Like, we have to talk about, when we talk about, for example, if we talk about adultification, we have to talk about why that's happening.
Yeah.
Who's in government? Why there are no after school club? Like, there's all of these things that we have to have a conversation about. And I think we have to also do that when we talk about VAWG. And I guess that's why we have specialized services.
Yeah. Which we both work.
I think I'll take that from the opposite point of view, because I was a young carer, so I care for a parent. Yeah, so don't misunderstand me. My mum is fiercely independent. Don't misunderstand, but like the caring role. I was the female child, so automatically that fell on me. So from 8 years old, I've been my mum's primary carer. Very independent. Don't misunderstand. My mum was the first Black female accredited practice teacher for Hertfordshire per patient. So she is not like a helpless, but like she has a debilitating disease, has help look after her. And I think when people, like, when I say that to people and people are, that's a young age to be responsible, because the mother is the head of the home. So by caring for my mother, I'm also caring for my father and my two brothers, even down to the point where they have children. I'm also helping with them. And I think, like, when people look at it and they think about, oh, that's really, but what you learn from being a carer, what you learn being in that caring role, the resilience, the independence, the quickness of your thinking and how to deal with situations, because you learn that for a long time. For anyone from the outside to kind of like look in and judge that, you know, and judge it as being, it's like, you know, society has structured it in such a way, whereas as a Black girl child, you're expected to be in this nurturing role. Yes, it can be seen as a negative thing, but at the same time, I would not be the woman that I am had it not have been for those experiences. And so I think, like, people come from the outside and they judge. And I think that has a lot to do with, like, the systemic issues that this country has when it comes to just understanding Black women, Black culture. We come from matrifocal civilizations, and that has been destroyed in many, many ways. And the way in which we live now, it's seen cultural, you know, these sort of like ideas of like, oh, well, it's going to be a single Black mother, like it's cultural. But I'm like saying it's not cultural in that way where you want to like dismiss it and belittle it and run it down. We were matrifocal.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuances, and I guess it isn't all bad and it isn't all good. Like, and I think the unfortunate thing about the services that we have is that there isn't enough money and time for practitioners to sit down and actually really understand each individual person's nuanced experience to be able to support them to a journey of thriving. And I think that's the thing that's missing. And the thing is, I believe we can get to a place where services are really supporting women and girls in the way in which they need to. But I don't think we're there.
That's why we started, because we wanted to meet each person that came and accessed our service as a human being first. Yeah. And whilst I'm not going to turn around and say I know everybody's intimate, everything about all of them. The one thing that I do know is I don't make an assumption about what I believe their life is to be. When they turn around and they say they're from this place, they're from that place, they're this age, they live here, they have this job, I don't make the assumption of what I think their experience is going to be. I listen to what they have to say. And so a lot of times, like when people say, oh, you know, especially for funding and things, they want you to tick the box. Oh, are they from this background? I don't need to sit down with that form because I get that information through the conversation that I have. And that, I think, is the thing that is missing. We have conversations with our clients. We speak to them as human beings that have walked through the door, and we understand what their needs are and allow them to guide their journey. And I think sometimes practitioners sit in a place of expertise where they believe that they know, oh, well, this is what's best for them to go in this direction or that direction. And we wanted a service where the journey was dictated by the service user and they were able to pick and choose their journey through. And I think that way, even when you are unable to understand all the nuances that create, they know what they need.
I guess even when we're thinking about the work that we do, a lot of us are moving towards less traditional, but traditional for us back home practices in terms of how we do this work. Like for me, doing violence against women and girls work as a practitioner, there's times where I would get in trouble at work because I feel like this young woman needs more time. But actually in this program, I have to work with her for 6 weeks. And I got to wrap it up.
And that's,
And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm just getting to know her. But she needs to work with me because she's a young Black woman and she's never had a Black practitioner before.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the sector sees that as important.
Sometimes we just want to be treated as women. Sometimes I don't want this person to see the colour of my skin. I just want to be treated as a female. Why do I always have to allow for the colour of my skin or my religion into anything? Why can I not just be treated as a female? But having said that, like what you've just said with your example and like it's cultural sensitivities, sometimes we do need to work with a person who might understand our cultural sensitivity. Like you said, you would want to work longer with this person. So I think sometimes maybe, or you know, we are maybe confused ourselves as well. Do I always want to just be seen as a woman and not the colour of my skin with it? Sometimes I want that to be allowed in as well because my sensitivities might be different to somebody else's. And I think it should be allowed. But a lot of the times I
don't think we're confused. Do you know what?
No, go ahead.
Do you know what? I don't think we're confused, right? And I think it's a great take. I think that we want the option. I want to be able to go into what they call a generic VAWG charity sector and be treated with dignity and respect, and it to be considered that I may need this because this is who I am. But also, if I want to go to the African Caribbean Women's Hub and see my people them, I want to do that too. And I think that's what it is. We should be able to have option. We should be able to go to wherever we want to go. There are sometimes I want to be with my people. And there are some times where, like, because of what's near me, actually, I just need to go to a generic service. Sometimes I don't want to see my people because what I'm coming to talk about, I might not want them to know because of the connectivity of community. Because community is great, right? Until
it
see,
isn't.
until you see your practitioner at the party on the weekend. Like, do you know what I mean? There was a time when I was working with young women and I was going carnival and I had to check myself and be like, I have to watch how I'm moving at carnival because I know who I might see people there, right? But I think we're allowed to want to have both. And I think because of the way the system is set up, we have been almost taught to take the crumbs and think that we're confused when it's like, actually, but why can't we have it all? Like, Bushra, why can't you have services to a generic service and be treated as a woman? But then why can't you also go to a specific service that you know you can get support because you're a Muslim woman or Asian or whatever it is? And I think there's a little bit of dreaming, reimagining that I think we all have to do, even as a sector, in terms of how we can work in it. Like, the work doesn't have to be so rigid. The support doesn't have to be so rigid.
I think it's the rigidity that we don't want, because I think it is important. I mean, fundamentally, we should all be seen as women. It should be that. But the reality of what we're living in, because of social constructs of racism, we're not. And so it is important that sometimes you just want to go to that generic space. And again, to your point, that it is sometimes I just want to be sometimes I just want to be in a space where people get me, so I don't have to over explain, because it might be a day where I don't want to have to go into all of the what it means. Let's say, for example, me being for example, use an example, I'm a survivor, and I now need to go to the police, but I might not be able to go to my normal cultural space because we know the statistics around racial profiling. Now I've added to that person possibly going to be incarcerated because I went to, and then the whole of that community who's supposed to hold me actually can't hold what I'm coming with. So I might just want to go to a generic space and have that conversation, and may feel safer in that environment to have that conversation than because of the social nuances of what it means to present in the world as a Black woman. So yes, we should be able to go in and experience the world just as women, and the barriers and the unspoken biases should not be there. But at the same time, sometimes I just want to hang out with my people, them that get it.
Like, there are some people that have a collectivist point of view where we're coming together, and within that you're going to have the individualist point of view where they're just like, oh, see what I can take. And I think it's not one, there is no one fix. I think sometimes it's really easy for us to turn around and say, you know, it is systemically, there is issues, but we also have to look at ourselves and see, like, what are the problems within us, and how well do we work with each other, how well do we support each other, you know. And especially from Luton, that is like London is very, very diverse, and I've been around 23 years. I've been around with other grassroots from different cultural groups, and they'll put on an event and it'll be this particular cultural group. You'll see the room sold out, you'll see it packed out, everyone from that community group showing up. Yeah, the same thing in our community group. Do we all turn up? Do we buy tickets?
It's true. It's true. I would agree. There is definitely something for us as Black organizations that coming together. I'm very big on collectivism. I'm very big on, you've got that skill, I've got that skill. Let's skill it out, dude. You know, and there's something about that. There's women who I know who work in this sector who, I remember even one time going for a job and I told this woman and she was like, I'm not going to go for it because I want you to get it. So there's a deep sense of sisterhood amongst some of us, right? And so there's some work to do to get us all together. And I agree. I think collectively, there's definitely something we are doing, but can continue to do and do more. There's different ways that we can do this work, whether it be creative, whether it be advocacy, case holding, or in the education setting. And I just want to give a little bit about how we do the work and the ways in which we support women and girls. Can you just talk a little bit about your experience and the way in which you do the work?
I think for me, when I was within education, within the schools, I mean, as a school teacher, you work one-to-one with young women and girls all day, every day, and boys, it's everyone. But it came very much at the education level. I was a science teacher, so it's like, it's even including the changing the way you speak about things, like changing your language, calling out behaviors within the classroom and trying to make sure that nobody's marginalized. And sometimes I think you don't even realize that you're doing it to have an impact on violence against women and girls, but in doing so it is. And that can just be behavior from young boys. It can be, you know, societal norms that make girls think that they can't do certain things or that they have to impress and things like that. But and then I think now in the charity sector, it's very much about making sure that you are non-judgmental. You're an advocate for these young women and girls. You make sure they felt like they're being heard, and making sure that you work like multi-agency, getting people that work close together so that they can have the best support that they need.
So with my role in learning development in higher education, I started that work 6 years ago now. And how I see it now is that we're building competencies, building core competencies like self-esteem, self-efficacy, and confidence. And while I don't only work with women, and I don't technically work with girls because everybody is over 18 in a HE setting, I think that we had a little bit of conversation about the generational difference, and there are generations that came before us that had to grow in their consciousness about violence against women and girls. Violence is against themselves as well. When it comes to what you've pointed out, Kafayat, about joy and thriving and true healing, it makes me think a lot about the multiplicity of violence or the violences that women and girls face, you know, in society. And when you when you think about, I guess, the services that are in place, and even the service that I worked for, we were available and we stepped in at a point in time where a lot of harm had been done. But then there's also a massive backstory behind the young women that come into the service. We were there to, as I said, physically keep them safe, and attempt to keep, different aspects of their life still going to school, for example, learning some key skills like cooking and things like that. That was what we needed to do. But there wasn't a broader focus, and there wasn't capacity for a broader focus on all of the other things. We weren't thinking about some of those key competencies, again, that I mentioned, like their self-esteem, their self-efficacy, and their confidence. We weren't thinking about some of the backgrounds. So we had a young lady that was from a very religious background. We had a young lady who was from a very economically deprived area in England. So poverty, and then also potentially religious trauma or cultural dogma were also elements of these young women's stories that impacted the way that they saw themselves, and then the ways that they would go on and live their lives, the way that they internalize shame. And all of that impacts their capacity for joy, their capacity to thrive. But we don't have services that can pay attention to those elements. We're looking specifically at keeping them safe, which is important. But who then goes out into the world as 18 and 21-year-olds? And what then do they face after? What mental health problems do they face after? What potential personality disorder or disordered behavior in general did we not catch, or did we not attempt to treat at that point when they were young?
When I first came into the sector, there's this, want to save the world, S on my chest, but there's a reality of I can only do what I can do, and I can do something. I believe I can do something. As you said, I remember saying to myself, I'm here today, seeing this young woman, I'm going to give her what I can give her today. Tomorrow will be the next young woman. And hopefully they will remember me. Even if it's not today, they might not even take me in what I'm saying today. Hopefully maybe one sometime down the line, they will be like, I remember what she said. Do you know what I mean? Or if there's enough of us saying the same thing to that one person, hopefully somewhere down the line, there's that, okay, I can do this. Because there's definitely something about more than surviving. We want people to thrive. We want to not just have people come to our services. They've done our services, they're no longer experiencing abuse. What happens then after you stop experiencing abuse? You have to look at yourself and be like, who am I after this?
I think the funding is not there, which I think goes into probably what we're going to speak about later in terms of like the political side of it. But the services that are there are amazing, and the work people are doing on the ground is amazing. And I see it firsthand. And like I see a lot of support with under 18 girls, and we work very closely with like contextual safeguarding, children's social services, care leavers. And, my service is a very wraparound, holistic service that can support young women and girls. But there is so much going on in their lives, and there's so much that has happened in their past and that is going on in their head and their home and everything, that if you sit down in front of them and you're kind of like, I'll say to them, what are you going to do this weekend? Like, what are you going to do to get yourself out of the house? Or what are you going to do to, maybe they don't have a house, and they'll be like, well, I can't go there because that reminds me of this situation. I don't have money for the bus. I don't have a coat. I don't have any food. So I'm going to just have to stay in. My electricity's run out. And it's like, how can I even begin to tell them, like, oh, go for a walk in the park? And what would we all do? We would go for a walk in the park and have an iced coffee or read our book. They might not have like the literacy level to read a book. They don't have the money for an iced coffee. None of us. I don't. Listen, personally.
Just about.
So
just about.
And so I'm kind of like, it's such a bigger picture than this. Like, they're struggling to get through the week with their food and everything. And then, or they come to school and they don't have a pencil case because they don't have equipment, because they don't have anywhere to stay at night. And then we're trying to, try and figure out what can help them get through everything that's going on in their life and bring them joy. And it's like, right now, it is true. They just need to get through the next day.
So Natalie, when it comes to what we're seeing in terms of the manosphere and the rise of the red pill and having a son, as a mother, how do you navigate what is happening?
It's funny, we were talking outside about the manosphere, and I was saying, it's not new. It's just repackaged, right? We're not hearing anything new. The messaging is now maybe hitting a younger audience, and obviously social media exposes a lot of young people to a lot of things that maybe they might not have come across as soon as they are now. But I think, like, my son's 21, right? So he's a young man, I know, and he's a great young man, but he's still a man, right? And every day I'm going out into the world and I'm seeing and working with people who, and then I'm going home to a young man who sometimes he says things and I have to look at him and I really have to be like, how are you saying that? Like, I'm your mum, like, you know. But I think it's difficult, and I think he is still figuring out who he is and finding his way in the world. And even with me as his mum, right, there's still messaging from his peers, from the social world, from the internet. And I was saying as well, like, the manosphere stuff has never come into my algorithm, you know. I've never seen anything Andrew Tate or like they've literally never come on my feed. And I was like, it's because I don't have time to be fighting everyone in the comments, yeah? And I would be fighting everyone in the comments. But I think it's really difficult because I want to raise a well-rounded young man and I want to give him the messages and the tools to be confident to pull up other men as well, right?
And surely if the main perpetrators are men, something needs to happen to the man then, or the men. Some kind of intervention is necessary to be able to have the conversation, because if we're living in environments as households, as you said, from some of the experiences that you know, where the family culture is supported of violence against women and girls, and there's other women that are doing it, then obviously there's other men in the home who are a part of that.
But it's that
And we need to have the
patriarchy allowing
conversation.
that woman to think that this is how it should be, because they just won't question it.
So, but that's the reason why we need to have that. We do need to have services where men are being taught how to do things differently, because there are things like I had a conversation with my friend the other day, and we were laughing, but not using humor to acknowledge harm, right? We're using in an appropriate way to acknowledge harm. And we both said that when we were young girls in school and we thought that we was cool, that a man was coming, our boyfriends had cars to come and pick us up from school. We thought we were cool. We thought we were the gal them that had the man, had the car, and he came to pick us up from, that was grooming.
Yeah.
That was just grooming packaged differently. Same sweetie, different rapper.
Yeah.
That was grooming. We didn't think of it as grooming.
No.
There are some people who are now looking at their relationships where they dated men that was slightly older than them, who were probably been in relationships for a long time. All of this information is coming out and they were like, right, you know what?
Yeah.
When I think, and so it's a conversation that was normalized. And so we need to break the chain of what is accepted as normal to be able to have the discussion about violence against women and girls. We cannot do it on our own. And I really am going to say this, and I might be controversial. We need to find a way of not man-hating in our language and the way that we have these issues, because all you're going to do is push them further away, where we need alliances of men, not to be the savior. We're not asking you to come in this space to do the man thing and come over and save everybody. But what I want you to do is, when your man friend and you saw him hit his girlfriend, you don't just stay there and don't say nothing. You're supposed to pull him aside and say, yo, brother, that is not okay. What you did right there is not okay. Or if he didn't hit her and he's there, yeah, man, I know where my girl's location is all day. I'm checking it. Hello, that's not okay. We need men to be able to talk to their men folk to stop the perpetration. And that's a conversation that sometimes people they just don't want to have it. We cannot do this work in silo.
We can't.
Well, I think with that manosphere, and like you say with social media, it's these people who become celebrities, you know, that these young boys think it's cool to be like that. You know, we just, like you said, they're in their own room. We just can't control it. My friend and I, we went to, I think it might have been something to VAWG related, and she's got 2 boys. And literally she said, I didn't realize, right, that I'm going to go home and tell my boys now, if you're walking home at night and you're walking behind a female and it's dark, cross the road on the other side, because she doesn't know. She might think you're stalking her or following her, just to make her feel comfortable. And this boy was 18, her son. And he said, well, why would I do that? And she said, look, because she might feel uncomfortable. So it was the mother who was having to say, look, so that this woman doesn't feel uncomfortable, why don't you just cross over the road or whatever? So it's conversations that we need to have within
and hopefully
families.
Those boys go and tell their friends.
Yeah.
And it's the knock on a chain effect
ripple
of
effects,
people having a conversation.
I also think there's something, back to your point, around the impact of social media and what it's been doing and what it can do, is because you could very much live in your own household and have a womanist or feminist principle and have your own child be a part of the manosphere culture. And I think that's a conversation that people don't want to have, because if you were to sit down, because we have less in-person contact with our family and our people because of the access to social media. People are online, they're in their own rooms doing that. A lot of people still don't sit down and have dinner. As a parent, when I was in my marital home, that was something that was standard. We all sat down at a dinner table because we were fortunate enough that we were able to have a table to sit down and eat at, right? And it was something where we still did that family connection stuff. People are not doing that now. They go in their room, they're ordering food from Uber. You have no idea sometimes what your young children of age where they're allowed to access social media are watching. So you could be at the Million Women's Wife March marching and being really empowered, and you're with your sisters, one woman, one body, and you're marching and you're going and you're marching down the road, and your son could be in the room watching. I don't want to give rise to the name because I think when we say the names, it makes people search them and whatever. But those people that were in that documentary, and they could be very much in your house watching it, and you don't even know. So we're having conversations in these spaces, and we think we're doing the work, and we don't know that it's actually also happening in our household right underneath our nose to the very sons and daughters that we love so much. Because it's not just about talking about your son could be watching and being a part of the manosphere culture. You've got the women who are, the men are grooming, or the women who think that way is the right way to be. And that can be happening right in your household.
Them men are there living in their own echo chamber. Okay. Same way that actually a lot of the time in VAWG, we can also have our own echo chamber.
Like a battle.
I mean, we can call it a healthy debate. Like, where I think it's getting to the root of what people think. Because, like, and I've tried to do it actually with men in my life where some of them have, I've got, especially like newer friends that I've made, where they say certain things, I'm like, what did you say?
Yeah.
And we have to sit down and really start chipping away. But why do you think that? And where did that come from? And then when you get to the bottom of it, it is that they've been taught a certain thing about women and what it means to be a man. And they're not going to unpack those things unless somebody puts a mirror up to them. And if they're just in their echo chambers where all their guys are saying the same thing and they're going online and seeing them wallads that are just talking a whole bunch of garbage, they're just going to keep reiterating the same concept. So I think there needs to be an interruption in a way where it's safe enough for them to not feel like they're being attacked, but it's also not soft enough where we're just like, yeah, no, man, no, I get it. It's I get it. And so I think there does need to be some more like actually meeting people where they are. Otherwise, it's just they're gonna perpetuate themselves. And punishment doesn't work because look at them, man. They're, that I don't want to even say his name, but he's been arrested how many times? He's been on house arrest, but he's still continuing. Punishment doesn't work.
I think, with these kind of male models or whatever, well, they're not models, but, role models, they're forever telling young men, this is what you've got to do, this is how you've got to behave. But, young men, they're not getting that at home. So really some of the responsibility does sit in the home. If you've got family around you, look at the young men that are being influenced. Are they, what is their background? Where are they coming from? Because I meet a lot of young men and they're not influenced and they just think it's quite funny and stupid and, laugh at it and mock it. But then you see the young men that potentially do come from maybe a broken home or have struggled or are living in poverty or are struggling or have mental health issues or, might have other, things that aren't going well for them that get attracted to it.
But Saba, I think you're making a really good point. I think there is something about what we're speaking about young boys, right? And in terms of the influence and how they follow whatever models, role models in this manosphere thing. I think it also then relates to what you're seeing also in older men or older people and how they're influenced by particular political parties. And we're seeing how there's an influence across the board, and maybe because of social media, maybe because of the home, maybe I don't know what it is particularly, but we're seeing that there's an influence across the board that wasn't in the same way 10 years ago. And I'm not going to blame the internet, but I am going to blame the internet because
it's a need to belong, isn't it?
Yeah,
people want to belong,
and unfortunately, people want to belong with and align themselves with particular political parties, which for me is starting to feel really dangerous, especially when we think about the work that we do, right? I think as it comes closer to the elections, there's a real conversation about who do we vote for and why. And I don't know who has the best interests when it comes to women and girls. Everyone's going to have a manifesto. Everyone's going to say something about protect the women and girls. The question is, what women and girls do you want to protect, for one? But it leaves me in a place where I'm like, should I vote? Do I vote? And who I vote? Like I'm really contemplating that, and I'm gonna land with I'm going to vote for somebody, because I don't want my votes to be wasted. But who is something that I'm really thinking about.
It doesn't make you any lower than a man if you are respecting your woman, your partner, your wife, or whatever. Because a lot of men think, well, if she's doing the housework or she's doing this or she's doing that, that might be their way of respecting. But a lot of men now I see saying, well, actually, you know what? If I go and help her, that is respecting her. If I don't expect her, like this is generally in a lot of societies. We both work full time. We both come home. We're both tired, right? But majority of the time, the women still have the childcare when they come home rather than the man. And I think it's important for the man to think, well, actually, by showing respect, if I just say things, like the saying and the behaviors, the talking and the behaviors are two different things, isn't it? So I can preach whatever, but until I practice that with my behavior, it's not going to become a reality. So if now I'm saying, well, let me show my wife respect, I actually help my wife. So my brother would say, well, I actually help my wife or whatever. I do this, this, and this. He could say to his friend, like, when you come home, mate, come on, to realize she's come home and she's had a hard day. There's no harm in helping her or whatever. So that conversation will have that ripple effect if the men are talking to each other. But if the men are going to just prop each other up by saying, well, actually, I just come home and I go to the gym and I do this and I do that. And she comes home and she takes care of the kid. Oh, look at what a lovely wife she is. She does everything for me.
Some cultures support that. I think there's another thing that we around having what it could look like for men. There needs to be a type of man in that conversation, because there are some I know that at the time when I was mothering, when I was working full-time corporately, when I was taking two of my or whoever of my children that needed to go to some extracurricular activity, I was lauded for the ability to be able to do that. I was seen, that is what I was seen as a good woman because I was able to do all of those things. And I'm going to be honest, I was with somebody at the time who was an amazing cook and I didn't do the cooking, right? I didn't have to do that. And I am so grateful for that. So I'm not even going to minimize that. That helped massively. But there's a certain expectation that has been for so long of what a good woman looks like. The woman that I am now, for many people, I'm not classed as a good woman because I will say to a man, if you're looking for a woman that's going to cook, I'm a businesswoman. I don't have time to come home and feed you and do all of the things if I'm out at a conference or I've done all of these things. In terms of how we look at a men and what that can look like, it's creating a space where there are the men themselves who look at being in a relationship, and I'm talking this from a heterosexual relationship here. If you're in a relationship with somebody, that is a partnership. And within that partnership, it's not 50-50. It depends on who's got capacity within that moment, because the capacity shifts. There are going to be times when I'm going to come home earlier than you, but I feel mashed up, so I didn't even cook. And you came in later, even though I was home, and you did, because it's around what was the capacity that was available at that time. Those are the conversations that need to be had of what it looks like to be in a healthy as you can be type of dynamic in a home relationship with a heterosexual couple. And so therefore, the kind of resources that need to be available is to have that conversation, because there is still a lot of people who don't think that that is a way to be. They think that even to be a good, even though he's not shouting at you, and maybe because your partner, it might be a man, let's just say, use this as an example, who's earning more money, you should put up and shut up because he's provided everything for you. What are you complaining for? But actually, no, I'm a human being. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
100%.
I think it's around having those really, for some people, those uncomfortable conversations. But I think the power is the way in which you create the bridge between the two sides. Because I think the reason why there are conversations that need to have and what people often avoid is because we blame either side. We have a victim blame or we blame, and that it's not going to work. If you came to me, let's say me and you had a discrepancy and we've got a difference of opinion, and you came to me with blaming language, what do? I just shut down. I just shut down straight away. I'm going to shut down. Whereas if we had a conversation where we're being respectful to each other to say, when this thing happened, all right, for example, I could have done something to you without it being intentional whatsoever. My intention wasn't to go there and to hurt you, but yet you felt that harm. Does that mean the harm is not still with you?
Exactly.
And I think that's the thing that we need to do. So people can be, not always, but people can be acting in ways where their culture supports the behavior and they don't even see it as harm because nobody's been able to have that conversation with them. So I think if we are going to address, and we're going to talk about how we deal with the male man part of violence against women and girls, if we are going to engage in that way, we need to do it not from a blame perspective, an accountability perspective, but the way in which we speak around it. It's not to sugarcoat it, not to minimize the harm that's been caused, explain that there's harm been there, but the delivery is what is going to get the reception that is required for the continuum of conversations outside in the environment with their man.
I've heard people use the term calling people in instead of calling people out. And so
Yeah.
because if you're saying to someone, you're a perpetrator, you're a dick, they're gonna be like, whoa, like I don't even want to start a conversation or have a conversation with you.
So I know with the perpetrator program, the idea is to work with the perpetrator. So if they've got a drink problem, drug problem, substance misuse, and they keep repeating that behavior with various victims, is to rehabilitate them and kind of help them get over whatever the issue is they're dealing with. Because it could be that they've got childhood trauma, it could be that they're the victim of abuse themselves. So it's rehabilitate them, and then they won't repeat that pattern of behavior again. So I understand it. I can see why they're doing it. But there's, when it comes to like LGBT plus community, there's very few perpetrators that they'll come forward, because you have to come forward yourself, or you have to be referred. So it's I get the idea, but I'm not sure how great it is, and could that money be better invested in other areas of VAWG?
Okay, you know what? I take back. I don't love it, but I like it because because I guess there's, if we're talking about prevention and we're talking about supporting women and girls, right? Why are we supporting women and girls after they've experienced violence? Actually, there's something to do, that preventative work, and a lot of preventative work is focused on young people, and that's great. And we also need to then speak to men. And so actually, when I think about the perpetrator work, it is needed and it is necessary. So as you're saying, they don't repeatedly offend. But I think for me, it's that money bit. Where you getting the money from and who you taking from? Unless you are making more money, love that. I doubt that, but that's what it makes me think about. But okay, I understand that.
I was gonna say I agree as well. Like a lot of immediate psychology, especially under the NHS, is like we're catching people when they've fallen into the river and we're trying to pull them out. It's like, oh, hey, come out of here. Or they're in there, you're like, oh, hey, how did you fall in the river? That's also not helpful because they're already in there. So we drag them out, dry them off. All the kind of work we're doing is about getting them back to the a stable ground. But then actually we need more people going upstream and finding out why people are falling in the river in the first place, which is a lot of the preventative work that people start to do from early on. And there's so much research that shows that, people that have experienced childhood trauma, ACEs, exactly. And all of those things are huge contributors, or that the kind of correlation of them becoming abusers in the future is a very high correlation. So there's something about either preventing it from the start, which is, like you were saying, working with younger people, or the adults, especially male perpetrators who are attacking women, finding out what is going on with them and hitting it at the core, because there is something there. Hurt people, and it doesn't make it any woman's responsibility, but as a society, there's a responsibility to stop the harm in the different ways that we can do it, and one of them is stopping the harm happening in the first place.
So what is ACEs?
Adverse childhood experiences.
Okay,
that's all goes.
Sorry, no, I know.
We're all like, we know.
You know your stuff.
I think growing up in Glasgow, I've done a lot of work on health inequalities and the impact of adverse childhood experiences, and we see how it has such kind of severe health impacts further down the line, and I think it's that idea of children who experience parents in kind of domestic, and who have kind of experienced domestic abuse, that has such a profound impact on those children. And I think it's that idea that VAWG is never isolated to the individual that it experiences is so far reaching, and that's why it's a societal problem. It really is. But I think you're so right, and I love that metaphor of the river. But prevention is always better than cure.
Definitely.
And if we can catch things early on, and it's that idea. I read something about if you fix a pothole right when it first exists, it's an immediate expense, but it's far cheaper than when you have kind of considerable damage and it gets bigger and bigger and it starts wiping cars out and things like that. I think if we invest money early on, like in childhood, we can make these massive changes. And it's like, it's expensive now, but what is the cost to women and to society to not fix the problem? I think I know friends who are teachers, and even just reading like kids who are 6 years old kind of who are spouting this horrific misogynistic violent kind of language. And it's like, teachers are there to teach, they're not here to tackle these huge complex issues. So more money has to go into supporting them, because we're raising a generation of kind of hurt, angry children, and if we can catch that now, that's the best thing to do.
And I was gonna say, actually, that was the last thing I was gonna add on, that this system, like I think someone said it earlier, it does hurt everybody, because it just hurts them in different ways. So patriarchal thinking of, I think you were saying earlier, like men need to be like this and men should be like that, which is the reason why loads of people I know personally were actually assaulted as young men, but they're like, no, I wasn't assaulted, like, no, I was. It's like, no, bro, you were under 16. Like that's assault. But because of the idea of what assault looks like, and it's men that pursue women, it's like, no, I'm fine. And it's like, actually, there's so many other aspects, like you were saying, the male suicide rate, men feeling like they're not good enough for women unless they have a certain, amount in their account, or, they look a certain way, or they're this tall, which is then cascades them onto the other extreme side of it, which is like, forget all these women, are fine, I'm gonna get my money. I think, like it's all it's all part of a wider. All of it is oppression. It's just that where we get the brunt of it, and they get a different type of experience of it. But it is, like you said, it cascades out to all of us. So healing and protecting women does heal and protect all of us.
Absolutely. You talked about the bridging both sides, right? Do you believe that there's a way that you can bridge both sides politically, in terms of a political party? In terms of, you got the May elections coming up, the May elections coming up in May, right?
Local elections.
And for a lot of people, there is a sense of, I don't know who to vote for. I don't know if I'm even going to vote. Because right now, who is being presented to us as candidates are not worthy of some people's votes. What people feel people are not worthy of their vote. Have you landed anywhere in terms of where you feel like there's a party you can confidently vote for in terms of your needs or wants, or thinking about violence against women and girls?
When I look at everyone's manifesto, they say all the things that we want to hear, but no one has really gone down to the grassroots and say, okay, what is the survivor going through? How could we prevent this type of behavior? No one has actually done that. So I think, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to really think very, very hard. I'm even going as far as not voting, because I think it's gone to the point, and I know you put your hand on your...
No, I put my hand because I'm same. But
because I feel like I've even gone to the point now where I feel like my vote is so precious, because I know that we fought to get that vote, and I really respect that and I honor that. But it's like, I've gotten to the point now where I want to vote for a party that is going to stand up, against violence, and like make a mark. So I don't see any party doing that. And so that's where I stand, to be honest with you.
Well, I've been aware that we're in a system that's ultimately a two-party system. It's only really two parties that will win an election. But it's an interesting watershed, because we're at a time where we don't actually know who those two parties might be in the next general election. It's always been, as we know, Labour or Conservative. Those are the two parties that will always get in. We had a strange period in 2015 where the Lib Dems came in, and based on their behaviour and some of the negotiating and the compromise, that will probably never be the case ever again, or at least not in a few generations. However, there is now scope for the far right to get in and become maybe a third, likely not second, but potentially a third party in the political landscape. And I think what's quite scary is, whilst the far right want to attack legislation like the Equality Act, they're also out in the street saying things like protect our girls, and there's no sort of criticality of thought or conversation about what that means. What does that mean? What do you mean? Who are the girls that should be protected because they don't look like me, or they don't look like a girl that would come from me. So I think we're at a really interesting time. I think that there's a lot of questions to ask. I do understand why people feel really disillusioned and don't want to go to the ballot. But I think it's really important that we go to the ballot. I think that we actually, I've said this for quite a long time. I moved away for university. And I think that it's important for those of us that move away and go to university to consider maybe what impact we can make in the different towns and cities that we actually go to. Because as you rightly said, the north and other places of England and the UK in general, there's different things going on there. So if we come with our mentalities to attend often the educational institutions in those places, and we register to vote in those places, and we cast our votes in those places, we can make some difference in the electoral system or in who gets into power. But all of us being sort of in places like London and Bristol, we're concentrating a lot of the change in those places, but there's a national picture that needs to be considered. So I think that this is such a long conversation. Yeah, way beyond sort of the scope of like the time that we have here. But there's so much to be said for sure in terms of the political situation.
You make a really good point, because when I watch the elections as they're live, there's such a heartbreak as I see the further it goes out to London, the bluer it gets. And that's when I'm reminded, I'm like, oh yeah, I live in inner city London. And as you spoke about, I guess the positive, my positive echo chamber of people who
that's
think
the word
like
I
me,
wanted to say. Echo chamber. I couldn't
people who
remember
think
it.
like me, think like me, or do this work, and we believe we're voting for the same people. But there's a reality that just outside London, sometimes you see that it changes very quickly. You see flags up, and it is very heartbreaking. But I think what you said, Jade, is a very practical and a real, like, tangible thing that we can do to actually begin to shift that.
I actually don't know who I'm going to vote for this time around. I was really lucky that Jeremy Corbyn was an independent in my area, so I was able to vote for him, which was a very easy vote. But I recently have moved, so I'm like, gosh. So I'm going to read the manifestos. It's definitely not going to be Conservatives. It will be a very cold day in hell that I ever vote for them. Labour have absolutely dropped bombshells of behaviour in the last few years. I'm genuinely shocked and dismayed at like who they've become. It's actually terrifying. I'm like, bro, you man, I can't see the difference between them right now. Which is really scary, very very scary. I don't know how we got here. So yeah, they can't get my vote. So yeah, it's kind of looking at who's left. In the worst case scenario, I'll spoil my vote. It's still there. It's still being counted, but it's I guess me saying that none of you are good enough. But lesser of two evils, it might end up being Green, but I need to read their manifesto.
I think it's interesting because I have a similar like story to yours, I think, because I was under Diane Abbott. And so for me, it was an easy vote. But I think it's really interesting what we both said is that the easy vote in terms of who our leader was in Labour were the very people that Labour actually pushed out. And so I think there's something about Labour really figuring out in-house what they've got going on, because they're really doing something to their voters. And I think especially of a particular age, I think there's some of us are like generational Labour voters in terms of our parents, and it's what you do. But I think there's a particular age group that are like, oh, nah.
I can't mess with you no more.
Yeah.
Because ours was family voting. Like, we just always knew as a family we voted Labour. But I think it's because we're a Black Nigerian family. So that's, they're not going to vote for Tories who were saying,
get us to go home.
Get out my country. All right. So they're like, not you guys. So it was just a historic thing. And then even like Jeremy Corbyn, he was so active. Like, growing up in that local area, we would literally see him. Like, he wrote a letter for my mum so that we would get support to get housing because we were, sharing a 2-bedroom. He was so proactive. So to this day, I always big him up. If I see him in the street, I'll bang my horn. So there was a buy-in there where we actually saw the evidence of the care. Whereas the last 2 years, the care is not there. They have become career politicians in how they practice.
I very much look at it and think that I'm someone who would kind of maybe like to be a politician one day, but I'm looking at these parties and I'm just thinking I don't see myself kind of represented in any of you, and
Go for it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but
Maybe
yeah,
you're the change we
maybe,
need.
and I think young people do want change. You know, from my circles, I'm seeing people who were kind of always thought they were Labour and they're moving green. I think moving now from Glasgow to London, I'm trying to figure out also where's best for me to be registered to vote. Where's my voice going to make the biggest difference in these local elections? And I do think it's down here.
Yeah.
But for me, the Green Party, the amount of people that I know that have moved across, the amount of friends that I know that moved across, the amount of just the things that I hear from people that are closely involved with the Green Party, for me, you know, like you, I would never not vote, because for me, I think it's a privilege to vote. And if I'm going to keep talking about politics, then I've got to cast a vote.
Yeah.
I'm from a Labour household, right?
Yeah.
Black working class family. We vote Labour. We've always voted Labour. I don't know, you know? Like, I literally am just like, I want to. I want the values that Labour are meant to have. I feel like that still aligns with like the work I do and who I am. But I need action. I need to see. And I'm not like what you were saying, you're kind of waiting, thinking, okay, Labour, and now this should be beneficial to people like me, people that I work with. I'm not seeing it. So it's just kind of, but then who else? Right?
Yeah.
If not Labour, then who? And I know who I want it not to be.
Yes.
So I can tell you who I definitely won't be voting for.
Yeah.
But then it's still that kind of, I don't know. And like my dad, he came here, in the 60s? And my dad's always voted Labour. And my dad said to me last week, I'm not voting. And I'm like, how are we getting to a place where it feels more beneficial to not vote, to not use your vote, than to actually go and use
But
your
what
vote?
worries me is if we don't, what does that mean then in terms of where it lands? That also for me,
because the
equally-
people who didn't vote, who are now voting,
yes,
who are they voting for, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the real danger.
So that voice is loud.
Yeah, and to me, I feel it in a certain way. It's almost relied upon that people are going to vote this way so that this doesn't happen, rather than actually delivering on anything that has been promised in the past before.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, it's like it does seem very much to me like it doesn't seem to matter who's in charge. It's like, we're going to do these things, and then once you've got, it's 4 years. What difference does it make? You don't have to worry about me again.
You know, just talking about politics, I don't know if any of you saw it. I saw it was a Sky News thing, and I think it was that Beth Rigby did it, and she had 4 I think they were Conservative and Labour. They were across the board people there.
Candidates.
Huh?
No, I was
Did you
saying
say it?
candidates. No.
Oh
Go,
no,
go.
they were MPs.
Okay.
Right. So there was one, Jess. She's the one who heads the VAWG in the
Just
Labour
finished.
at the moment. And there was a Christine Noakes. I think she's from Conservatives. So I don't know if you lot saw this, but so Christine Noakes said apparently Boris Johnson's dad, Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson's dad had touched her inappropriately. Now this went out, there was 4 female politicians there, this went out, but nothing ever came of it. It was all just brushed under the carpet, you know? So this big Prime Minister's dad, he was an MP as well, so he touched Christine Noakes inappropriately. And it was just brushed under the carpet. So the MPs or whatever didn't do anything. Jess was there as well, and others. How does that make me feel as, like you say, voting for a party when they're brushing things under the carpet? None of the parties are making me feel that they've challenged this behaviour or of somebody or whatever. I would think, well, if I was just voting on who represents VAWG the best or who will tackle it the best, I don't know if I have any confidence.
I think for me, the issue would be around, I know we can't always go around statistics, because statistics can be used to tell the story on either side, depending on how you want to use them, right? But if we're looking around I think it's 2023 was the Home Office Fund, right? So let's say within that period, they had a million violence against women and girls crimes were reported and recorded. And they gave 8.4 to the budget from the Home Office Fund and all of those things. That within itself goes to show they're not taking the situation seriously anyway, because that's not enough money to do anything. That's like probably £1 per person.
Listen,
to be able, that's like £1 per person to address an issue that we know is a global issue, right? And then when you look at the structures of the fact that even when we're talking about violence against women and girls in terms of what is needed, in terms of funding and budgeting across the board, get like 3%. What's the number? It's like a really minuscule amount of money. Now, if there are people in positions of power who look at these numbers and they haven't already decided without our vote that something needs to be done, who can I feel really honestly confident in that you're actually gonna, is your structure, because there's one thing about, let me know how you feel, and what's happening in your community, and doing all of that stuff and coming to all of the VAWG sectors to get people in, whether it's the cabinet ministers or whoever, to try and get our vote for whatever it is. And you want to have all of this dialogue when you know structurally you can't do nothing.
You can't do it,
Like, what is the point in having the conversation when you know structurally, which is the reason why we have charities? Because if the people who were in power were doing the things that they needed to do from within their structure, and they were willing to do the work to do something different, you wouldn't need the charities in the first place. And the majority of the people who were doing the charitable work in those sectors are the marginalized people who face the worst harm in the first place. Like, make the math make sense. Make it make sense. So therefore, for me, I'm not going to say whether I am or I'm not going to vote. That's something that's quite personal to me. But when I sit down and I look at all of the data that's around me, I say often, I've now come to a point where when I'm looking about violence against women and girls and I'm looking about it in the sector, I look at not the individual thing that's happening, structurally what's happened. Because if you go back to the structure and break it down, you get the answers before anything. You get the answers.
We have the ability to affect change, but if we're talking politically, I don't think any political organization or party is going to want to go so deep as how we go deep. And, you know, and I think sometimes I have to be real with myself. Yes, I am going to cast that vote. Yes, I am going to do that. But this work means so much to me. And I think it's just greater than me. That sometimes I do get overwhelmed. And then sometimes I do take a sidestep. And sometimes I do have to say to myself, am I actually in the right arena? Am I actually kind of like focusing on what I need to focus? And I never want to forget myself. But I think, and sometimes it does affect us, like the work that we do, it really does affect us. And I think we need to be so aware of like how we feel. And like when you hear someone else's trauma, it can bring up trauma within you. So I think we need to be so self-aware of how we're feeling. But yes, do I love the work? Yes, I do.
And just to end, I just want to ask you all in terms of, and just going back to that thing about joy. And happiness and resistance, but joy. How are we all finding joy in our lives as practitioners doing this work?
There's no other work that I think that I would rather be doing than this work here.
So sweet. That was so sweet. It was so sweet because, like there's a love for the work. Is it sometimes grating because of the stuff? Yes, but as you said, like I'm thinking about like working with young women specifically, and the joy that brings to my heart, and it brings to my younger self.
Yeah, but I love us.
I love us too.
I love women of all, like black, brown, white. I love us. I just love us as a species. And it's like, you know, I don't want to get too emotional because sometimes I can when I start talking about the passion that I do have for us. And it's like I really feel that people just need to embrace how women feel and need to kind of like cherish us, because we give birth to like children, we nurture children, we then are mothers and aunties, and you know we then go on to be mentors, you know, for like women and children. Why would someone then want to go back and hurt us? That I really can't understand that. And I think when I first got into this remit of work, that's the thing that I really kind of struggle with. Why would anyone want to hurt a woman or a girl?
Getting to witness other people's joy. I think getting the freedom to create and curate the life that I want for myself while like creating joy with people. I'm really, really enjoying that.
I hope that more of us get to do the work and be in these spaces and raise our consciousness, not because we've been violated or not because violence has been perpetrated against us, but because we're in this space and we want to be around us. We want to be with people who are like us, you know, women and girls, and we want to be custodians in our own way. So yeah, I think it's so important. And I would love to be able to continue, doing the work that I do.
Nah, you're not gonna make me cry, you know.
No, it's so
I don't know.
nice.
I feel
Wait,
quite
I
emotional
don't
as well.
what? Woo. No, you're actually gonna make me cry. Okay, Megan, because wow,
I'm not sure I can follow
of course you
that.
can.
I think what you said is really important. What's important to me is that I recognize that working specifically with young people, I love it so much, but it is such a privilege. You are at such a position of, especially with the girls, like they really look up to you sometimes as a young woman, even in like the minor things like, Miss, where did you get your hair done? Or like, just the tiny, or they'll ask you questions about stuff and they really hang on to what you say. And it's the same with being a mentor, with being an older sister, with being an older cousin and auntie. And like, I feel the same. Like I come from a very big family and we're all girls bar one. And I'm one of the eldest, and it's always been such like you feel like this leader of female change, and like all of my cousins and my sister and everyone look to you. But I just think it's such a privilege to have, and then going into working in schools and then going into the charity sector, like you really can see the difference you can make, especially when you're working with these minds that are so amazing and have so much to give to society still. And I think I just want to make sure that I always love what I do and it never feels like a job. And I think that's really easy to say because it doesn't matter what you do, work will feel like work. But like,
Yeah.
sometimes I have to ground myself and go outside and touch grass and think like, no, you have to remember why you're doing this because it can be hard. And I think it's ignorant of me to not admit, like, working with young women, you do get sometimes the vicarious trauma of the things you talk about, and it can be tough, and you do have to take yourself home and have your little self-care time and make sure that you are in the right mindset. Because one of my friends always says, like, how can you fill somebody else's cup up when yours is half empty? And it's true, but I will always do it. Like you can't stop me. It's what I always say. My parents were always like, why are you like this? Like, where did you get this from? And I'm like, I don't know, but I will always be like this. And I think we can do so much as women, and we're just, we're amazing.
I think
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I was saying earlier that I got a message this morning from someone where I'd done some work a year ago. I spoke and they contacted me today and said, I don't know if you remember me, but we spoke and I follow your socials and I'd really love to have a chat with you. And that's what brings me so much joy, is that when I do my sort of talks and my work, that it has an impact on people. And that's the reason why I do it, is because, my lived experience is cultural abuse and childhood trauma, and I've turned that into my advocacy today. So the fact that that can actually change or help someone, that just makes me so happy. So I absolutely love it. So yeah, that's the best thing for me about this work, and being in, getting to that age now where I can actually stop and say, okay, I'm switching off now. Everyone can go away. Phone stays in aeroplane mode. Cats on the lap, book here. But I know that I've made a difference for someone.
Talking about that outside as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, jumping.
No,
Just
do.
the idea of just, I feel so lucky that so many people have paved the way before me, and just the idea of helping people up that ladder. And conversations like these really make me feel. I hate that we're having to have these kind of conversations, but I think just speaking to like-minded people and knowing that, although sometimes it feels like you talking to a lot of people who are just kind of neutral and are not wanting to make any change, but speaking to people and knowing that we're all making changes. And mine's a very little small corner of my world, and I know you guys are further reaching. Thank you, but no, I think just
none of that, none of that,
None of that small
hold
talk.
your space.
None of that small talk.
Yeah, I think holding space, taking up space, is also finding joy. And like I didn't know about the Million Women Rise March. I think with being a fairly newish move to London, but I know after our conversation I went along to that with some friends, and it was I went. Yeah. I meant to message you about it afterwards, and just standing there and just feeling the
Got
chills,
that
and
mama
just
moment.
knowing just knowing everyone was there, I think was so incredible. And I felt real joy, and it was just like, yeah, there are people who care. We're not alone in this fight, and we're getting somewhere. It's slow, but we are getting somewhere. And I think, I take take joy in that. But yeah, thank you. That was truly feel.
On that note, I think I'm going to end on that note because I think speaking to you all today, you've all reminded me why I love this work. And I know I love it. That's why we're doing this. But sometimes you have those reminders where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this work one way or another. It doesn't have to be in a charity. It doesn't have to be, it can be wherever, however I choose to do it. But it's in you. When it's in you, it's in you. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm going to vote. Everybody, I'm going to stay in the sector. Okay, that's my two commitments. And I want to thank you all for the conversation today.
Thank you.
You are great.
Thank you. And thank you for setting us up.
Yeah.